Hey, what is going on, guys? It's DK. Back at you with another video here for my final look breakdown of the Week 6 NFL main slate on Draftkings. Before I get into the video, if you guys are new to the channel, my name is DK. I make daily videos breaking down NBA, NFL, PGA, and esports daily fantasy sports slates. I do want to say thank you guys again for all support. Right now, closing in at 5.3 thousand subscribers. The easiest way to support me with all the content being free is just leave a like button on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you know when I upload videos. You know when I go live. I'll be live streaming 1 hour before lock on my YouTube channel to go over everything and answer any questions you guys have. Also, if you guys cannot watch YouTube videos, I do upload on Apple Podcasts. The link is in the description below. It's just the DK DFS show. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the video. So, we went over the Vegas numbers here in the early look video. I'll go over them again in the live stream. Not a lot has changed here, so no real need, in my opinion, to go over these again. But yeah, let's start with quarterback. And quarterback, I think there's a few different ways you can go here. If you're talking again, I'll kind of talk cash and GPP. We have, Lamar at the top has kind of been underwhelming so far to start the year. Didn't do a whole lot in the ground last game, which is a little bit worrisome. 7.7, it's not like we're getting him an amazing discount. But, I still think the upside is there with Lamar. He is a guy that can get you like 100 yards in the ground for a quarterback. The matchup is fair here. He kind of had an off game last game. I think the ownership is going to be pretty low. I don't know if I could pull the trigger on him in cash, but I kind of like him in GPPs. Aaron Rodgers at 7.5, it feels kind of expensive, right? But he is getting Devontae Adams back, which is a huge boost to this offense. Aaron Jones healthy. Tampa Bay is not like the worst matchup, but it's not like a great matchup either. So another one that I probably don't go to Rodgers in cash, but it's hard to not like the Rodgers Devontae Adams stack of GPPs, really. Like, I think that's going to be pretty popular. I just don't know if I can do it in a cash game setting. Deshaun Watson, I think, is playable in cash at 7K. Now, the downside here with Watson is he's really not doing a whole lot on the ground, which does lower his floor a bit, in my opinion. The matchup's pretty fair here against Tennessee. His pass catchers are pretty cheap too. If you want to pair him with either Fuller or Cooks or even Cobb, I think is at least in play. So yeah, I'm perfectly fine with Deshaun. I guess as a play at near the top range for both formats. Big Ben at 6.7. Probably not going to get to in cash. I think that's just a little bit too expensive both ways in cash and GPP. Matt Ryan's at 6.6. He's strictly just a GPP play. So up and down. This offense is it's struggling. They have the talent, right? They have the receivers. Julio's back, Ridley. So maybe this is the get right spot. It's a really good matchup too. If Minnesota struggles defensively, I don't think you can do it in cash games at this price. Now, yes, I like the Matt Ryan stack in GPP, right? With either Ridley or Julio or both. Run it back with Thielen, right? Or Madison, right? There's a lot of different ways you can go in this game. And it's going to be a popular game, right? Both defenses struggle. So yeah, I have interest in Matt Ryan, but he's only a GPP play. I don't think you can trust it in cash. Brady at 6.5, it feels a little bit pricey. He had that 136 fantasy point game against the Chargers. Another one I'm okay getting away from. Now, Cam Newton at 6.5. My worry with Cam Newton is, looks like he's going to be good to go, but they're playing against Denver. They're 10-point favorites. And we've seen this New England Patriots team, they want to run the ball. If they're playing from ahead, they are going to run the ball a ton. Now, in games where you project them to play from behind, like this game against Seattle, that's when I want to target Cam Newton. In this type of game environment where the Patriots are probably playing from ahead, I think they're going to want to slow it down. That worries me with Cam Newton. So I'm probably not going to get to him in this game. Now we're getting some cash game plays here. I think both quarterbacks in Jacksonville and Detroit in this game are playable. Minshew's at 6.4. Feels maybe a little bit pricey, but he's had 20 fantasy points in 4 of his first 5 games. And this is a really, really good matchup here against Detroit. Both defenses, again, are not great in this matchup here. So I'm perfectly fine with Minshew. He's got some cheap receivers. I think he's playable in both formats. I think he is. And Stafford, too. 6.3K. Stafford hasn't had, as much upside, but this is an amazing matchup against Jacksonville. Again, so I think both quarterbacks are in play. There's receivers, cheap receivers, honestly, on both sides. You have James Robinson on the ground. I'm not going to mess around with the Detroit running game, but there's a lot of viable ways you can go in this game if you want to maybe stack it up. But I think both quarterbacks are playable, and definitely guys I'm considering for cash. Cousins I'm considering in cash too, just because of the amazing matchup. The concern with Kirk Cousins is Minnesota isn't on a team that really wants to air it out, right? They did against Seattle when they played from behind, but the other 2 games, or other 3 games behind that, or other 4 games, I should say, 22, 27, 26, and 25 pass attempts. Not great. Now, sure, we kind of know where the targets are going to, right? It's Thielen, it's Justin Jefferson. So if you think this game does turn into a shootout, then it's really game stackable. Right, and it's both sides. Atlanta, you know where the target's going to. Minnesota, same thing. So this game is going to be popular if you want to stack it up. I have no issue with that. I think he's cash game playable just for the reason of the matchup, right? And no Dalvin Cook. Maybe they rely on Kirk Cousins' arm a little bit more, but Madison is a really, really solid backup. We'll talk about him in a bit. Let's see, Bridgewater against Chicago. I just don't want to do it with the matchup. Now, Fitzpatrick's at 5'9". I think he will get some ownership. I actually think he's playable in both formats. It's a really good match against the Jets. We saw what he did against San Francisco. San Francisco is, pretty solid defensively. So, put up 30 fantasy points against them. He did the one kind of dud against New England, but New England is another team that is really good defensively. Last 4 games, 27, 25, 26, and 30 fantasy points. He's a guy that kind of get it done on the ground a little bit, surprisingly, for how old he is. I think he's like 37. But, yeah, I think Fitzpatrick is actually playable in both formats here. There's no way I'm playing Phillip Rivers. Tannehill at 5'9" is another guy I think you can consider. The Texans struggle defensively as well. Tannehill put up 30 fantasy points the last game. If you think they're playing from behind, then I think that's a really big boost for Tannehill. Now, the concern with Tannehill is kind of the same thing with Cam Newton, right? Tennessee's run-first team. If they're playing from ahead, it's going to be a heavy dose of Derrick Henry. So it's all about how you think this game kind of plays out. But that is the risk with Tannehill. If they are playing from ahead, they're a team that is going to want to slow it down. Probably not get to Foles at 5'8". Wentz against Baltimore, I'll pass. Daniel Jones is playable. He hasn't had a touchdown in, I think, 4 games, which is kind of crazy. Matchup's okay. Can get it down the ground, but yeah. Just a GPP play, I think, if you're looking down here. And that's really it for me for quarterback. So let's move on to running back. And I talked about it actually a decent amount here in my early look video with running back and how I think there's a lot of different ways you can go in cash games. I still think there are. Now, who are the plays I think are going to be popular for cash right now? Well, I think Madison, even at 7-2, is going to be a guy that's pretty popular in my opinion. I also think Mike Davis is going to be pretty popular because of his floor with his pass-catching ability. But I think, and Ronald Jones, if Fournette is out, I think those probably 3 would be the backs that would be the most popular for cash games. But I think there's a lot of different ways you can go. I think there's literally about 8 or 9 running backs I think are playable in cash games. I'll show you, right? There's a lot of guys you can look to for GPPs. But I think that the running backs for this week there's a lot of guys in play for cash games. Normally, most weeks, I look at the slate and I can kind of tell, which running backs I'm going to for cash. This slate, again, those 3 I mentioned, but I think there's ways to get different if you want to. Aaron Jones, we'll start at the top. So first, yes, McCaffrey not coming back, Dalvin Cook out. Okay, Aaron Jones, 7-6. Matchup, not amazing. Devontae Adams coming back, maybe a slight hit to Aaron Jones. The issue really here is Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is still getting a good amount of work here with this offense. So Jones is not a workhorse back, but he's being pretty productive with the touches he's getting. His floor is high because he's a good pass-catching running back. This is a game that is, on the higher end of over-unders. So, yeah, Aaron Jones is solid. I think more suited for GPPs, but, definitely someone you can consider. I think Derrick Henry is also another guy that will be considered in both formats. Now, my one downside here with Derrick Henry is no real involvement in the pass game, which does lower his floor a bit. But like I said, matchup is pretty good here against Houston. And if you think they're playing from ahead, you're going to want it. You're going to probably want some Derrick Henry exposure because he's going to get a ton of work. If you think they're playing from behind, maybe you go Tannehill and A.J. Brown, another guy I think will be pretty popular. Now, another reason that I don't think Derrick Henry will be maybe as popular in cash is because I think A.J. Brown is going to be super, super popular. People are not going to want to play a running back and a wide receiver from the same team in cash games. So that's kind of his game theory aspect. Let's see. Again, Madison, I think he's going to be popular. It's hard to argue, or it's hard for me to really say negative things about Madison. He's been really good. When Cook went down, he had over 100 yards. He's a good pass-catching back. It's a great matchup. I think he's going to get a majority of the work. The price is very fair here at 7-2. So all those reasons, I think Madison is a pretty safe play and someone you can look to in both formats. I think he will be pretty popular. But again, I think he is a really, really solid play at his price. James Connors at 7-1. I think he is playable in both formats. Maybe fringe cash playable, but definitely suited for GPPs. Again, he's a pretty decent pass-catching back. The workload on the ground hasn't been amazing, 16, 18, and 15 carries. But again, he probably will get 60, 70% of the touches, 7.1K. Not like an amazing price, but I'm perfectly fine if you want to go that route. Now, Mike Davis is a guy I think will be popular. I know the matchup's not great, but just the floor of his targets right now, 8, 9, 6, 10 targets. He's catching a ton of ball. He's basically playing like Christian McCaffrey. And he's playing really well, too. So, sure, matchup's not great, but hard to argue this guy's usage right now, and at 7K, I think he is definitely one of the better plays here at running back. Kareem Hunt at 6'9", not really the best matchup, but no Nick Chubb. The workload did go up a little bit for Kareem Hunt. They're still not going to use him as like a true workhorse back, but someone I think you can look to in GPPs. The reason I wouldn't necessarily pull a trigger on cash is not necessarily the best matchup there either. Now, James Robinson's at 6'8". I don't think he's going to be that popular, but he's someone that I'm looking to this week. For the reason of, I think he's probably going to get 60 to 70% of the touches here. Detroit really struggles against opposing running backs, and he's getting work as a receiving back. So all those things point to James Robinson. I think playable in both formats. I don't think he's going to be that high owned, but definitely someone that I think is in play this week. Let's see. Sanders at 6'6" is probably a pass me. I mean, the workload is there, but I don't really want to target him against the Baltimore defense. Again, you can consider him in GPPs, but probably not for me. Let's see. Taylor at 6'4". The workload is kind of going down on him. They're utilizing other backs. Like, sure, positives. Offensive line, Philip Rivers, does like dumping off the running backs, but only 2, 1, 1, and 3 targets the last 4 games. He's kind of been touchdown dependent. He has had a touchdown 3 of the last 4 games, but not overly excited about Jonathan Taylor for those reasons. Gurley at 6'3". I don't know if I trust it. Did have over 100 yards. Did have 5 targets, which we hadn't really seen from Gurley. This year he was basically just a guy that was getting no targets. So yeah, the matchup again is good, but I don't know if I can pull the trigger on Gurley yet. Feel comfortable. If you want to consider him in GPPs, fine. Mixon, again, tough matchup. The workload's been there. If you're a guy that's prioritizing, usage, then I think you can consider Mixon. But the matchup is really not that good. Ronald Jones at 6K. So this is strictly dependent on Leonard Fournette. If Leonard Fournette is out, I think Ronald Jones probably the top running back play. Has had over 100 yards the last couple of games. Green Bay, this is a pretty solid matchup, and he's getting a ton of work through the air. So if there's no Fournette, I do really, really like Ronald Jones. He will probably be the first guy I plug into my lineup if Fournette is out. So again, got to keep an eye on Fournette's status. So if Fournette is going to play and is going to get like a decent amount of work, then I'm going to pump the brake on Jones. This play right now is strictly dependent on the status of Leonard Fournette. David Montgomery, another guy I think will actually be pretty popular in both formats. And I kind of agree. Sure, hasn't done a whole lot on the ground last couple games, right? 27, 29 yards. But matchup is really good. Carolina struggled against opposing running backs. And with no Tariq Cohen, he has been getting a majority of the work, playing 80 to 90% of snaps. And the last couple games, 6 and 8 targets. So sure, he hasn't done a whole lot on the ground, but the floor is just, it's a lot higher in David Montgomery than it has been in the past for the reasons of the workload and his usage right now in the passing game. So I do like David Montgomery in both formats. Then there's three guys too that I want to mention. Gibson, Gaskin, David Johnson, I think are all playable. And if you need to spend down for cash, I think all these guys are actually playable. Gibson's been getting a ton of work through the air. Matchup's pretty solid here against the Giants. Myles Gaskin, great matchup against the Jets. They're probably even playing from ahead. Another guy that's getting the passing down work. And then even David Johnson at 5'4". He had almost 100 yards on the ground. He had four targets. He's not getting an insane amount of targets with Duke Johnson back, so that does make him a little bit riskier. But these are three guys that, if you need to save some salary, I'm perfectly fine with them. So, like I said, there's, in my opinion, a lot of different ways you can go for running back, but that's probably the last of it I would consider for cash. I'm not going to get to Ingram and Le'Veon now on the Chiefs. I don't really want to consider like Frank Gore. Freeman at 4.9 is fringe playable. You can look to him in GPPs, but I'm not overly excited about it. Last guy I will mention here is, where is he? Philip Lindsay, with possibly no Melvin Gordon. If Melvin Gordon is out, then Philip Lindsay probably does get a majority of the work. I would say 60-70% of the touches. Again, not a good matchup against the Patriots, but it would just be a price point thing with Lindsay. So he would be someone I think you could consider if there's no Melvin Gordon. Let's move on to wide receiver. So wide receiver at the top, the top guys do look good, right? Devontae coming back at 8K. I mean, you saw what he did the first game against Minnesota there. 17 targets, 14 catches. He's going to be a guy that's going to get a ton of targets every week. I'm perfectly fine if you want to pair him with Aaron Rodgers for GPPs. Both Atlanta receivers with Ridley and Julio, I think, are in play. Ridley's price is up to 7.8, but it's hard to argue what he's done this year. Besides that one goose egg, over 100 yards in the other 4 games. And again, really good matchup. Minnesota struggles in the secondary. Julio Jones, the price looks good, but are you willing to take the risk with his nagging hamstring injury? Right, we saw you try to come back against Green Bay, re-aggravated it, so there is risk here. Definitely would not consider him for cash, but I think both the Falcons receivers are playable in GPPs. Thielen I like at 7.3. I feel more comfortable with him than Justin Jefferson. 10 and 13 targets last couple of weeks. Again, great matchup, but is Minnesota really going to air it out? Allen Robinson at 7K. He's been so consistent. 9, 13, 10, 16 targets. The matchup is pretty solid here against Carolina. Sure, the price is starting to come up, but his floor is super, super high right now. Both Tampa Bay receivers in Mike Evans and Godwin are in play. Mike Evans at 6'9". He's a guy that does have that big play upside. He's a guy that can look to in the red zone. He actually has, 5 touchdowns in 4 games. And we have Godwin coming back. The price looks really good at him. Kind of a similar play to Julio, right? You're a little bit worried about him re-aggravating the hamstring injury, but the price point looks really, really good in Chris Godwin. 6'4" is, if he was fully healthy and didn't have any injuries, I would play him 100%. 6.4K is just too cheap. The thing that you have to have in the back of mind is, again, he's dealing with the hamstring injury. Other cheaper receivers, I'm perfectly fine with Fuller, Watson stack for GPPs. Fuller's a guy, big play upside, a guy that can look to in the red zone. Juju, at the price, it seems a little bit too expensive right now. Probably not going to pull the trigger. Hollywood Brown, another guy that more suited for GPPs. Definitely not a cash play, but if you want to pair him with a low-owned Lamar Jackson, again, I think that stack will be pretty low-owned. Maybe this is the game where the Ravens, offense kind of breaks out. Not overly excited about the Cleveland receivers. Their status is up in the air, but I think they're going to be good to go. Let's see. Other options here. Galladay at 6'2", I think is going to be pretty popular. I think is playable in both formats here. Again, good matchup. Price is fair. If you want to pair him with Stafford, I think Stafford's guy will be somewhat popular in cash games. And I think if people are going to play him, they're probably going to play Galladay. So, yeah, I think Galladay looks good. Again, I think he will be somewhat popular, but he's definitely someone I'm considering in both formats. Crowder, hard to argue what he's done. The targets, over 100 yards the last 3 games that he's played. It doesn't matter really who's playing quarterback. He's been getting it done. So if you want to go back to the Crowder route, I have no issue with that. Jefferson is playable, but I think more suited for as like a game stack. I feel more comfortable going to Thielen. Only 5 targets in the last 2 games. Yeah, maybe this does turn into a shootout. I think the best possible case for this game is if Atlanta gets off to an early lead and then kind of forces Minnesota to air it out. Then I think a lot of points could be scored in this one for sure. A.J. Brown. So the reason I don't know if Derrick Henry is going to be super, super popular in cash is A.J. Brown. 5.6K is too cheap. Number 1 wide receiver, no Corey Davis, great matchup. So yeah, he's going to be really, really popular in cash games. I think he'll be popular in GPPs too. Now, an interesting way to get different is maybe you just play Derrick Henry instead of AJ Brown, right? This is more, I guess, GPP talk, but game theory, right? Because AJ Brown's going to be popular. If AJ Brown maybe struggles, it's probably because Derrick Henry, they're just playing from ahead and just working him. So, yeah, but Brown again, I think is definitely one of the better plays for cash at that price. Edelman, I don't really want to target the passing game here for New England in a game they're projected to be playing from ahead a good amount. We do have DJ Chark status up in the air. If he's out, I think Cole, Chenault are guys you can would definitely get a boost and would be more playable on this slate. Chenault's at 5.2 to get a price bump, but they utilize him in kind of both ways here. He's a guy that occasionally will get a carry or two. Again, decent matchup. So if there's no Chark, I mean Chenault and Cole are guys that I think look pretty decent here. Cole at 4.9, Chenault at 5.2. Chase Claypool at 5.2. We do have Deontay Johnson confirmed out. So Claypool is going to get a good amount of work. Now, we're not going to get 45 fantasy points from him again. And I don't know if he's going to be actually that popular. Like, sure, some people might chase it. But I think he's just more suited for GPPs. If you want to go back to the wall, I don't hate it. Right? They want to get this guy the ball. And if no Deontay Johnson, he will play a decent amount of the game. So, yeah, if you want to go back to Claypool, that's fine, but probably not for me. Marvin Jones Jr. is an interesting buy low candidate here, right? 5.1 does feel kind of cheap. Has not been great the last couple games, only 1 in 3 catches, but maybe this is the get right spot here against Jacksonville. If you can't get to Galladay and you want a piece of this Lions offense, I think Marvin Jones is probably your guy. Let's see, Cooks at 5K. Now he seems priced about right. Like last night, he was underpriced at 4.1, went for 33 fantasy points after letting a ton of people down in his chalk the previous game. This feels right. He's a kind of an up and down guy. He'll play a majority of the game. I'm just like okay with it. Let's again, no Deontay Johnson. That's why I think Claypool actually is playable here. Other options, let's see. Like MVS at 4.6 is a guy that is their number 2 receiver. I'm perfectly fine with it. This is a game that is projected to have a lot of points scored. If you can't get to Devontae Adams and you want to piece this passing attack, probably MVS is your guy. So yeah, he's someone I think is playable in both formats. Again, the New England receivers are probably going to be a stay away just for the reason I'm worried that they're going to be playing from ahead and just really work the ground game. Fulgham's at 4.4 had kind of a just out of nowhere game, 10 catches and 13 targets. Now, we do have Deshaun and Alshon still out, so Fulgham's a guy that probably is going to play a majority of the game here. Now, I don't think we get that again, kind of same thing like Claypool, but 4.4K is at least, makes him playable on this slate. So, sure, the ownership might be a little bit higher on him, but I think he's viable. Yeah, I mentioned, Cobb. All 3 of the Houston receivers are fine. Cobb playing out of the slot, maybe not as much upside, but he also is the cheapest of the bunch. Again, I think he's just okay. Let's see. Adam Humphries, it looks like he's going to be back from COVID, from out. He's a guy that, will work in as their number 2 receiver. A.J. Brown is going to be popular on this slate. If you want to get different, maybe you go Adam Humphries. Right, 7, 6, and 7 targets. He's been pretty safe in the games he's played. Do got to mention it, the price on A.J. Green at 3.9 is tempting, right? Because we know A.J. Green's, he's a talented receiver. He hasn't really shown it this year. Obviously dealt with the hamstring injury last game, so didn't play a whole lot. I can't do it in cash, but the price is a little bit tempting in GPPs. And maybe this is the get-right game here for A.J. Green. Now, sure, right, matchup's not great, but that price point is tempting, I'm not going to lie. Dontrell Inman's a guy that I haven't really heard talked about a bunch, but he's the number 2 receiver. Besides the last game, 5, 6, and 5 targets. Giants matchup is pretty solid here. Like I'm okay with it. Probably not a cash play, but if you need someone really cheap for GPPs, I think he's fine. Zacchaeus is a guy with Julio playing. I'm not going to get to. If Julio's out, I'll be fine going back to the wall there. But Julio in, I think his workload is going to go down dramatically. There are a couple min-price receivers I do want to mention here. Darnell Mooney, flat min. He's the number 2 receiver right now for Chicago. He's playing 60-70% of the game. 5'9", 5 targets. Good matchup. I think he's someone you can consider for sure here. So, yeah, if you need someone really cheap, I think he's playable in both formats. If you want to go to him in cash, I don't think that's the worst idea. Also, I do want to mention Jeff Smith once again here for the Jets. Talked about him last slate a bit. He's another guy that's a flat min. Now, this is dependent on some news, right? Perriman's status is up in the air. If Perriman plays, I'm not getting to Smith. If Perriman's out, I think you can look to Smith. Also, another guy that potentially might be back is Denzel Mims. So, if both Mims and Perriman are out, I think you can look to Jeff Smith, who played a majority of the game and had 11 targets. 9 and 11 targets the last couple games. So, yeah, flat man price. If both those guys are out, I think Jeff Smith is playable in both formats as well. So, there are some cheap receivers here that I think you can look to in cash games if you want to. So, we're on to tight end now. So, tight end's tricky. In my opinion, there's no real standout play. Last slate, I really stressed spending up on tight end. I even mentioned, the Kelsey Waller stack. I like that a lot. That was my original build until I went back to the Giants stack. Still shaking my head about that. But again, the struggles of single entry life of only making one lineup. But yeah, tight end is, I think some people will punt it. There are some really cheap plays I'll talk about. Maybe you spend up to get different with a guy like Mark Andrews at 6'5". Probably wouldn't do it in cash, but pair him with Lamar Jackson, you kind of know where the targets are going with this Baltimore attack. It's Andrews, it's Hollywood Brown. Again, that stack is always in play for GPPs, and we haven't really seen the big game from Lamar yet. Maybe this is it. Maybe it is. Gesicki feels a little bit too pricey at 5'5". Font, I'm going to stay away from coming back from the injury. Hockenson and Juju Smith, I think, are fine in the mid-range. They do feel a little bit pricey. Matchup's good here against Jacksonville. Targets have been solid for Hockenson. Again, I think he's fine. Juju Smith, kind of the same thing. He's the guy to look into the red zones. He had 2 touchdowns last game. Good matchup. These are 2 guys I think are fine in the mid-range. Not overly excited about playing either. Tanyan had 3 touchdowns last game on only 6 catches. We're not going to get that again. 5-1 and got the big price hike. I'm probably going to pass it with Devonta Adams back too. I don't think I can do it. Now, Ertz at 5K has not looked like himself this year. Targets have been there. Is this the game that Zach Ertz finally has a good game? Maybe. He's going to be super, super low owned. Now, sure, right, he's getting up there in age. Hasn't looked like himself. 5K, it's not like we're going to give him an amazing discount, but I at least have some interest in Ertz because the targets have still been there for GPPs, and he's going to be super, super low owned. But I still think he's talented, right? At the beginning of the year, he's been decent. He had the one kind of big game against Cincy, 7 catches, 70 yards, 10 targets. So don't completely rule out Ertz. He's someone I'm at least looking to for GPPs. Graham at 5K, I know he's been getting a decent amount of work here, but it just feels like a lot to pay for Jimmy Graham. I just don't think I can pull the trigger on him. Evan Ingram at 4.9. I'm a little bit undecided here. That last game did ward me with only 2 targets. But previous games, he's been getting a decent amount of looks. 7, 8, 5, 10 targets. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but I still think Evan Ingram is playable and someone that I'm considering. Hayden Hurst at 4.7. He's running a ton of routes. It's a great matchup here. If you want cheap exposure to this game, I don't mind Hurst. I think he's fine, right? He has had a couple big games here. That one game against Dallas, for 8 for 72 and a touchdown. So, yeah, I think he's playable in both formats here. I'm not going to get to Gronk. Ebron is a cheaper tight end, fine. 7, 6, 5 targets last 3 games. Cleveland struggles to defend the tight end. So, yeah, again, Ebron okay. No Mo Elliott Cox. I think, we'll get to a couple of Colts tight ends I'll talk about in a bit here. Logan Thomas, I still have hope with Logan Thomas for the reason of he's running a ton of routes. Sure, only 4 targets the last couple of games, but this Washington offense has struggled. Maybe this is the get-right matchup here against the Giants. And, again, he's running a ton of routes. First 3 games, 8, 9, 7 targets. The price is cheap, so I'm okay getting to Logan Thomas. If you want to punt tight end with Logan Thomas, I'm perfectly fine with that. Hernandez is a guy that he had so much hype going into the air, just not living up to it. I can't do it. Trey Burton, I think, will be somewhat popular as cheap tight end. We do have no Mo Cox. His first couple games, 5 and 6 targets. So I do think Trey Burton's okay here if you want to punt the position. Again, Doyle is, where's Jack Doyle? He's at 2.7. He really hasn't been targeted, but if you want to get different, I guess that's okay. And is there anyone else I wanted to mention? I forget. Let me see. Oh, yeah. I've heard his name mentioned a couple times. That's Irv Smith Jr. He's the flat min for tight end at 2.5. Had 4 catches and 5 targets. You know, he's a good pass-catching tight end, but he's just really not getting a whole lot of looks, right? So, yeah, again, if you want to punt tight end, I think he's at least in play, but you're not really going to feel amazing about it. The reason I think he's at least in consideration is because of the matchup here. And that's really it for tight end. Defense is so variant. There's so much variance involved in the defense position that most of the time, like, I'm okay punting it. I'm sure, right? I went the Ravens defense last game. That worked out for me big time. They went for 26 fantasy points, but I think the Bengals at 2.1K is not the worst play. As long as they don't get you negative fantasy points, if you get 2 or 3 points from the Bengals defense, you're fine with that because it just opens up a lot more things in your lineup. Whereas over paying 4 or 5 for the Ravens defense, you never know. Maybe Philly gets it going and they only get 5. I don't know. I'm not prioritizing paying up for defense. Defense you kind of consider obviously the top. Ravens, Patriots, perfectly fine, right? Denver and Philly have kind of struggled here offensively. The Colts going up against a rookie quarterback, they've been pretty good defensively. Let's see. Don't hate the Dolphins at below 3K. Jets, probably the worst team right now in the NFL. So that's probably where I'm looking to, right? There's a couple different options. I'll talk about this more in the live stream, but Dolphins in the mid-range. If you want to punt defense, Bengals are probably the defense I would look to. Or, if you want to spend up, I'm probably fine with Ravens, Patriots, Colts. So that's kind of my thoughts there with defense. But I think that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. If you have been enjoying the content so far, I would really appreciate it if you leave a like button on the video, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell so you know when I go live. I will be live streaming 1 hour before lock on my YouTube channel, going over everything. I'll answer any questions you guys have, talk about, injuries and stuff like that. So, make sure to check out the live stream Sunday morning, guys. Thanks again. I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you all Sunday in the live stream.